Hey friends, you are crafting with Kim Byers at the Celebration Shop, and today we are making a really cute embroidery hoop with a fall design that I just put together. And it says pumpkin kisses and harvest wishes, and it has little pumpkins on it, and it has leaves and things on it, and it is so cute. So we are going to put this on the fabric with iron-on, and then I'm going to show you how to put it in the hoop, and we'll put some ribbons and things on it. It will be darling. But this design is really, you could do a couple different things with it. It would be great for a t-shirt or sweatshirt. It would also be great for like a tote bag if you were going to the pumpkin farm or the apple farm. This would be a really cute design for that as well. You could also do it like as a pennant and hang it on your little flag post. Some of us have like the little flags outside in front of our house, and this would be cute for that as well. Okay, so let's hop over to Cricut Design Space. I'll show you what we're doing, and then we'll go back to the craft table. We'll put it all together. And if you like what I'm doing here today, guys, please hit that subscribe button and join me every week for new videos. And don't forget to give me a thumbs up. All right, let's get going. Okay, so here we are in Cricut Design Space, and the very first thing you want to do is open up a brand new canvas. If you're on the home page, there's a new button there. If you're already in Cricut Design Space, you can just select new here and get a clean blank canvas. And then the second thing you want to do is upload your design. So this design, Pumpkin Kisses and Harvest Wishes, is down in the description below of this video. And I have a little video, I'm going to link it up here to show you just how to upload designs if you've not ever done that before. But if you have, you just go into upload and you'll see I already have my design here. But you would select your design and then you would insert it. Since we've already done that, I'm just going to cancel out. Okay, and then the second thing I like to do is I go into shapes and bring in basic shapes of what I'm making. I like to be able to visualize my design onto the shirt, or in this case the embroidery hoop, or whatever the case may be. So I went in and got a circle in shapes. All I did was turn it to white, and then I resized it to the size of the embroidery hoop that I'm actually using, which is 9.5 inches. So if you see here, if you type in 9.5, it automatically makes it the right size proportionate. But this little lock, just make sure that it is on. If for some reason it wasn't, then it wouldn't be a circle anymore. Okay, so we're going to close out of that because we already have one. Now, just so that we're all on the same page, we're not going to cut this circle. It is just purely for me to have something to kind of gauge spacing of what I'm doing. And there's also templates. Some people like to use templates, but for this, I'm just using a shape. Okay, so now we go over to the design. We've uploaded it, and you can look over into the layers and you see things are grouped. I want to actually tweak the design a little bit, meaning I want to take some things off. I'm going to make it a little less complicated. I love this pumpkin, but it's actually layers. And when you are working with paper, this is great. And you can do some of it with iron-on. But for this case, I'm going to take off some of the dimension of this pumpkin. So let's go over into layers, and we're grabbing the group, and we're going to simply ungroup. Now what this did is it ungrouped by the elements that I designed in Illustrator. So for instance, I have all of the lettering grouped in my Illustrator document, so it brought it into Cricut as grouped. So if you want to go in and make changes to each of these, just go ahead and hit ungroup again. It's not a big deal. And so you'll see that my two leaves there are still grouped, and then this is my pumpkin. And what I'm going to do here on the pumpkin is I'm actually going to hide or turn off all of those outer elements. So as I do this, you see that the pieces are disappearing. And those pieces are fantastic, especially for paper projects. I just wanted this cut to be a little more simplistic. So if I turn that one back on, I mean, you could turn on a few elements and then maybe change their color and make them a deeper orange if you had multiple colors of orange iron-on. I just chose for this particular instance to turn them off. Okay, so now we have the pumpkin, a little leaf, the stem, we have some scattered leaves here, some larger leaves here, and then the lettering. So what I want to do is I want to simplify it even a little bit more. So if you have a ton of different colors of iron-on, that is fantastic, but if you don't and you need to maybe you only have one color of orange, right? Or you don't have a green. What you can do is you can click on that element. So for instance, this green, and I'm like, oh, I'm going to change that to yellow, or I'd love to be able just to use a couple of colors here. So I'm thinking that I'm going to change that to yellow. Yeah, that sounds good. Okay, so then you can do it that way, or if you want to, you can go over into Color Sync and you can see all of the different colors that you have. So if you notice, this orange is a little different from this orange and this orange, and so if you don't have all those different colors, then make them all one. So what you do is you just grab that element and you move them into the same color batching. Super quick. And so you see you have this yellow, and actually the yellow that I have is a little bit more, it's a brighter. So I'm going to move all those leaves into this grouping. Okay, and so again for the orange, we're going to do the same for that. And so now I still have two colors of orange, a brown and a yellow. Well, what I'm actually thinking I'm going to do is I'm going to take the lettering and I'm going to change it to a different color. So now that I've clicked on this, I'm going to go up into right beside line type. It actually right now has a question mark, and the reason that is because I've highlighted two colors. So I've highlighted my orange and my yellow. So it shows a question mark because it's got multiple colors. Okay, so now that I have that highlighted though, I think I'm going to maybe do some sort of a blue, but I want it to be a little closer to the blue I'm actually going to use. So if you go down into advanced, then you can tweak that and kind of get a better feel for what it's going to look like. Okay, so now if we're looking in our color sync, we have an orange, a yellow, a blue, a brown, and a white. So I'm not comfortable changing the stem to something else because I want to make sure that it's very obvious that it's a pumpkin. So I am going to keep the brown, and then of course we're going to turn off this circle, so there will be 4 colors in this particular project. So I hope that helps you with your planning when you get like a really complicated design and you want to make it a little more simple. The other thing obviously is you could turn things off. You could just delete or eliminate certain items if you didn't have all those colors. Okay, so now that we have everything turned to the colors that we want, the next thing we're going to do is make sure that everything's grouped the way we want it to be grouped. So I did turn this blue, so if you want to go back and turn that into the yellow, you can do that. Just make sure in color sync that it's still that same color yellow. Okay, so next we want to pick our machine. So we could use the Joy, the Maker, and the Explorer for this project. This is just iron-on. There's nothing overly complicated about it. But I think today I'm going to use my Cricut Maker. And so let's go ahead and select Make It, take it to Matte, and see if our design has any issues that we need to tweak. Okay, so now looking at mattes, we have a very tiny little piece of brown. We have our orange, we have our yellow, and we have our blue. So here's what I wanted to show you. So you always go and look at all of the mattes before you cut, because obviously I didn't attach the hearts to the top of my letters or the top of my eyes. So let's hit cancel. Okay, so what we want to do is we want to look at our lettering, and so if we click on it in the layers panel, we see that it's all grouped together. We're going to ungroup, and then we're going to grab each one and make sure and attach. So that's going to make sure that my heart goes with my pumpkin. We'll do the same for kisses. We're going to attach, and the same for wishes, and attach. Now what I would personally do is go back in if I wanted these to cut together and not have to worry about, you know, figuring things out and spacing them appropriately. I would actually grab each one of these words. It'll just save you some time on the back end, and you can attach them. Okay, so now that our lettering is together, let's select Make It. Okay, so here we are in mattes. We have 4 different mattes because we have 4 colors. And what you want to do when you're doing an iron-on project, guys, we want to mirror every single one, and the sooner the better so that you do not forget. Even if, like in this case of the stem, you're like, oh my goodness, I don't need to mirror that, it's the same on both sides. Just do it out of habit so that you don't accidentally cut something the wrong direction. I've done it. It is a nightmare, and you're so upset because you lost material. So just always hit that mirror when you're doing a iron-on project. Okay, so now all of our mats are good. We select continue. Our maker is already attached. And now if you have chosen favorites, they're all listed here. And we're going to be using foil for the stem, and I'm going to be using everyday iron-on for all the others. So since we're doing the stem first, we'll go ahead and select iron-on. Now, if for some reason you did not already have that as a chosen favorite, you just go to Browse All Materials and you can see all the things that your particular machine can cut. Okay, so foil iron-on. The next thing we do is we hop over to the craft table and put it on the mat. Okay, so here we are on the craft table, and these are the things that I'm going to be using today. So I have 4 different colors of iron-on. I have my embroidery hoop, I have a clear acrylic ruler, I have my Cricut mat, and I have a number of different fabrics. I'm only going to use one. I'm going to use white, but I wanted to show you guys that you could use some really bright, beautiful colors. I would go with solids just because of the lettering, but you could turn your design a singular color, so you could turn it white or black or orange against a solid colored fabric if you wanted to go that way. I'm going to embellish mine with ribbons and things to bring in more color, but if you only had one color of iron-on, you could flip this around a little bit. And then I am going to use the EasyPress Mini just because I wanted to be able to use the tip of the Mini to put on all those small little leaves. Okay, so let's move everything out of the way and we'll put the first thing on the mat. Okay, so let's start with our blue. So this is a remnant piece, and I know that I need a 6.5 by 5 inch piece. Now I use this trimmer honestly for pretty much every project because it allows me to have straight edges for one, and for two, it allows me to save a lot of material that I could then use for another project. So what I'm gonna do is I have a ruler here and a ruler across the top, and if I flip it out, I also have this. So what I wanna see is how big is this piece. So it is roughly a little over 5.5 by 7.5. So what I can do is I could go ahead and trim off the excess piece so that I could use, I could use that inch for a lot of things, right? We're about to cut a stem that is so teeny tiny, but I could use a remnant for that. So what I want to do is I said again that this was, I think about that's about perfect. So we're going to make this about perfect. So if you move it to the 6 here, you're moving it over the trim line, and now I can save this piece of material for next time. Okay, so let's go ahead and put that on the mat, and I am going to use my scraping tool, and for iron-on you want to place shiny side down because remember we're mirroring the design, we're cutting it backwards. Okay, and so then just take your scraping tool and put your material into place. Okay, now we'll take that over to the Cricut Maker and cut it out. Okay, so our machine is already queued up. We put the mat underneath the feeds. Okay, and so now it's loaded and now it's blinking, and we just select go. Okay, and so now we've cut our material, and I just want to take it off the mat. And I always tell you guys, make sure that you bend the mat and not the material. You can use the scraping tool if you need to kind of help it get off the mat. But make sure that you bend the mat and not the material. Now this always happens to me this time of year, or if it's depending on the color, but I have a really hard time seeing what I am working on without my bright pad. And it's because like today it's actually fall and it's very kind of dark outside. It's kind of nice, it's cool temperatures and everything, but it makes the house a little bit darker and it's harder for me to see things. And so my bright pad makes that much easier. So now that I put it on the, with the backlit screen, you can see the cutouts from this font because it has a very thin cutout within the font. It's actually super cool. But now you can take your weeding tool and go ahead and start getting out all of that excess material and not damaging your design. Like after you've spent all this money on your materials and spent all this time, the last thing you want to do is damage the cut. But I can really pick this up and see it so much easier on my bright pad. Okay, and so now it's done. So now we just need to move on to the next color, put it on the mat, and weed it out. Okay, so I went ahead and cut out all the rest of my designs, and then I took my piece of fabric, which is just a piece of scrap white fabric, made sure that my hoop would fit on it, and then I took my EasyPress actually and just ironed it. I wanted to get all the wrinkles out of the material, make sure it didn't have any blemishes or anything like that. And so now that I know that it's good and ironed and that it fits my hoop, I'm just going to open up my hoop, just unscrew it, open up my hoop, and now I'm going to put the fabric into the hoop. I just want to make sure that everything is going to be perfect before I iron on my design. So when I place it in and it stretches out the material just a little bit, I may have to open it up just a itty bit more. Okay. There we go. So now I know my fabric is going to fit. Okay, now what I want to do is I want to take all of the things that I weeded out and I'm going to trim out, so if you remember my pumpkin, all these little leaves, I need to trim all of those out so that they're separate, and I need to do that to my other leaves. And the thing is that I'm going to do, once I get all of this weeded out, and now that I have my lettering, remember my lettering I actually attached, so it's as it should be in the design. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to press it into place first, and then I'll add all the other details around it. Okay, so let's go ahead and trim all of those out. And one thing I want to share with you guys about putting this in the hoop like this, now the fabric is going to have that indentation or that wrinkle, so it's going to give you a guide and you're not going to get things off center. Now this is just my advice to you. Some people say, oh, go ahead and cut off the excess. I personally would not do that, because if you pull this out and you put everything on and it looks beautiful and you go to put it back in and you've trimmed your fabric and maybe you get it a little off center, then it's going to be off center in your hoop. So my best advice is just use the indentions that you've made by placing it in the hoop, center it the best that you can, and then if for some reason you get it slightly off, it's okay, because you haven't trimmed away the excess fabric yet. Okay, so let's move on and trim out all of those little elements and we'll start putting things in place. Okay, so now we've taken our clear acrylic ruler and I've placed it, and I'm looking at the indentation that the hoop made in the fabric, and I'm finding my center point. Now my hoop is going to have ribbons and things hanging from the top, so I'm actually not going to put my design in the center. I'm going to put it a little bit more towards the bottom of the actual hoop. So what I want to do first is I'm going to take my center point, which is here, and I'm going to place, well, do this, okay? So basically my design is roughly 5.5 inches across. And so my center point for my hoop is here, and then 5.5 inches across is 2 3/4, right? So I should be getting about 2 3/4 go for my design. So it's going to take a little bit of work to make sure that you have things exactly where they should be. But trust me, when you get everything put into place and you iron it on, it's going to be worth all the math that you have to do, guys. Next up is using our EasyPress to put our design into place. And I had told you before that I was going to use my EasyPress Mini, which I still am, for the tiny little leaves, but because I have such a large section of text, I'm actually going to use my smallest EasyPress to put the lettering in place. If you can, using the EasyPress, if you can, always use the EasyPress that can cover the entire design at one time. And if you're only going to get one EasyPress, in my opinion, it would be the largest, just because I like to do really big designs with signs and things like that. But if you're mostly doing small things, you can get away with the Mini, or you can get away with this little guy. So he's going to cover a large section at one time, but I do have a couple of EasyPresses, I will be honest with you guys, and it's because I do so many iron-on projects. I love making signs and t-shirts and all the things. But for today, we're going to use these two sizes. Okay, so now my EasyPress is to the right temperature. And just so you know, guys, so when you're using an EasyPress, you want to make sure that you have looked at the guide, which I will link up down below. You want to make sure that you've looked at the guide and you have chosen the right fabric and you've chosen the right type of iron-on. And the guide's going to tell you exactly how hot to make your EasyPress, and it's going to tell you how many seconds to do it. Okay, and so once you're done on one side, you're going to take that piece of fabric and flip it over, and you're going to do it on the back side. Okay, so now our design is in place. Biggest thing about this, following the guide. So if you were to pull this away while this was still warm, most likely your iron-on would come up. So what you want to make sure you do is follow the guide, and the guide says a cool peel. So it is all the way cooled, and you always, guys, pull from the corner. Okay, everything is coming away perfectly. Just go slow. In case anything does pull away, you can always put it back down and then do it again. Oh, perfect. Okay, so now all we need to do, and I had something underneath that, thank goodness it came up and didn't actually adhere to the fabric. So now what we need to do is pick out the next item. That could be our pumpkin. We could do our pumpkin, and then we could do our little stem. And these items are actually small enough to where we could use our mini. That can cover the entire thing. Just make sure that whatever you do, you never overlap the backer or that protective coating. So now we've removed it from the layer that we just did. And so when we place this on, we just want to make sure that we don't overlap coatings. And if you do, whatever you're ironing on is on the very bottom. So for instance, if you put this in place and then you want to protect your lettering because you're afraid that your EasyPress, if you're using a bigger one, it's going to touch your lettering, you can just put the cover back on, and then that way the one you're ironing on is on the very bottom, so it will adhere to the fabric. This stuff will actually adhere to the plastic coating. Take it from someone who knows and was devastated when she messed up her design. So just make sure that this guy is on the very bottom. Okay, so we're gonna break back out our ruler and make sure that we have that in place. Okay, so not only did I put the pumpkin in place, I also put the ampersand in one of the leaves. And so now I'm just going to lift off this. I am going to kind of put that back in place just to protect it. And my EasyPress Mini is hot and ready to go. So now I can cover up my entire pumpkin. Okay, so a little tip when you're putting the leaf and the stem on the pumpkin. So the leaf is going to be slightly on top of the pumpkin, and then the stem is going to go slightly on top of the leaf and kind of line up with the top of the pumpkin. So it's going to be slightly layered. Just make sure that you protect the rest of the design. So once you have it in place, just use the piece, and I'm just using the same piece that was over top of the lettering, and then I'm going to use my mini to put the leaf into place. And I don't really recommend going back over the top of iron-on when you don't have to. I mean, sometimes you have to, and that's okay. As long as you're careful, you're not going to mess it up or anything like that. But it does, you know, reheat it. But if you can keep from getting on it, that's probably the best. Okay, and so now for the stem. Once I have that in place, and see the sticky wants to stick to, you know, the topper that's on this is wanting to stick to this one. So you can kind of use that on the smaller pieces to make sure you get it in the right spot. So I think we're good there. Now for these tiny little leaves, what I recommend is putting on just a couple at a time because again, you don't want these, you know, protectant sheets to overlap, and then you can just reuse that one for your lettering again and put those into place. and then you can peel those away and put the next layer on the next layer, because right in here we actually have an orange and a yellow overlapping. So we'll do a few here and a few here, and then we'll put it back in our hoop. Now that everything is ironed on, the next thing we want to do is we want to put it back in our hoop. And so then we're going to cut off the excess fabric. Now here's the tricky part. Well, it's not really tricky, but we want to make sure that we have everything centered, right? So we're going to need our hoop top, because the fabric is going to want to stretch. And again, guys, this is why you do not trim it off in advance. And you want to make sure that the top of your hoop is centered. Let's just look really quickly. Okay, I think we're about right. Okay, get our hoop. And I wanted to leave excess up here, remember, for my ribbons. I think that's about perfect. And then what you do is you take the top of the hoop and you twist it in, and that's just going to tighten it so that your fabric doesn't shift. Okay, making sure that everything is in its right place. And then you need a good pair of fabric scissors. So guys, if you only own one pair of scissors, that's totally fine. But if you have multiple pairs, designate one when it's brand new as fabric scissors. Scissors that cut fabric and then cut paper and then cut fabric, they will become dull, and so they won't cut your fabric as well. So just make sure that if you can, have a pair of scissors purely for fabric, or you can use a rotary cutter. And for this, you could use a rotary cutter. This is a self-healing mat, but I'm not sure I can get all of the pieces, so maybe we start with a rotary, and then we can go back with scissors and clean it up if we need to. Okay, just holding it down, apply pressure, and go slow. Okay, so now I just tied a really small ribbon to put up at the top, and I'm going to use hot glue to attach it. And then we'll be ready to hang our embroidery hoop. Okay friends, so what do you think? That was pretty cute, right? So I love the embroidery hoop thing. I am actually thinking that I'm gonna put this on a t-shirt for my little niece. I think she would love it. And so I hope you'll hop down in the description below and check out all the things that we used today, all the tools that we used, as well as the cut file. If you have any questions, make sure you put them in the comments down below. I do my best to get into the comments and to answer everyone, because I want you guys to have fun crafting. So if you have anything, just leave it down there for me, and please hit that subscribe button and join me every week for new videos. And if you liked everything today, give me a thumbs up. All right guys, see you next time.